Welcome to Wednesday afternoon. This session is called Women Speak Their Truth. And really the inspiration for this is that we have an SDG goal, Sustainable Development Goal, around ending all forms of discrimination against women and girls. And this applies to the work that we do, like the projects that we work on and the work that we do. But it also applies to how we experience being women and leaders and change makers in the world. So we're going to have a conversation about that. And in the recent times, there's been a lot of movement around this. So in 2016, 2017, the Me Too movement started, all related to survivors of sexual assault. And then in 2016, we had the Not One Less movement, the Ni Una Menos in Argentina in response to a brutal rape. In 2017, we had the Women's March, which was the first full day of Trump's presidency. In 2017 as well, we had the Time's Up movement, the Hollywood Anti-Harassment Coalition. And last year, we had the women's strike in Iceland. Women left work at 2:55 p.m. On the Friday because they're paid like 26% less on average. So it was a representation of, well, we'll leave earlier than the men. So there's just this growing momentum, and we wanted to, not ignore that that's also part of our work in the world as well. Until our system values the feminine as much as it values the masculine, it won't be equipped well enough or balanced well enough to have balance. In 2017, of the Fortune 500 leaders, only 32 of the 500 are women, and that slid back down last year to 24. Just to give you a sense of the power differential in the world that's going on. To bring it to our world, half the world's agricultural work, including forestry and fisheries, is performed by women. And those women have far less access to resources than men do. And what we know from research is if the playing field was made level by giving equal access to resources, women could actually increase their yields by 20 to 30 times, farm yields by 20 to 30 times. If women were paid fairly in all business sectors, we would also see benefits in terms of staff retention, productivity, and generally the well-being of the workforce would improve. This is what the research shows. So we know all these things, but we're still a long way, right? We're still a long way from being there. So, Rini, how do you feel about all of this?
To be honest, I'm very frustrated that we still in these conditions. We know that we have been fighting for gender equality since, I don't know, in the 19th, 18th centuries. And then there has been much going on, and then there has been a lot of progress and achievement that we've made, but still the discrimination is still there, and there's not yet an equal opportunity for women compared to the men.
Karen, you've been working in sustainable development like most of your career, all of your career, right? What's it been like for you?
So I do think that there are many parts of the world where we've made a lot of progress, but there's still a whole lot of progress more to make. One reflection I was going to have is so I've worked for nonprofits, and nonprofits are often heavily dominated by women. They are seen as perhaps not paying as well as other jobs, and so women go into the nonprofit sector. And yet when you look at the largest organizations at the higher levels, there's still frequently men leading them. So how do we make that evolution? It's certainly not always the case. There's always examples, but there's still work to do there on that front. And I think a lot for us to think about in terms of how we make those changes.
Yeah. So you've been kind of, an environmental leader in Liberia for a long while. And so what has it been like for you to lead as a woman in, on the causes for the environment in West Africa?
So I think over the 20 years that I've been working now in West Africa, in the environmental sector, it's quite a lonely space. For many, many years, I was one of the very few women in the room altogether. And I see that shifting now. I actually see more women in the room, but also a lot of international women in the room when it comes to the environment sector. So there's more women at the table, but it's not necessarily West African women, which is really a dichotomy when I look at the rest of my life and sort of where I live and how I spend my time, because over the last, 12 years plus since the war, I see women really growing in Liberia. I see a huge number of really strong, incredibly dynamic women. And that's kind of the challenge that I see, is sort of how to connect the dots there and bring them into the sectors that we're working in.
And what do you think is kind of this barrier for them?
A lot of it has to do with the fact that it wasn't seen as a sector that could provide jobs and opportunities, so it's not something that people have studied. So I think it's just that we have a long way to go to get to that point. I think it's changing, but it will take a decade to make that full change, where people see the opportunities, want to get involved, and then become involved. Investing in the next generation, I think, is key.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Lisa, what do you see as the most powerful ways to empower women and girls?
So there are many ways, because I think it's important to recognize that women and girls are different and have different experiences. One key thing is really being humane. So understanding that we're talking about human beings with very different perspectives and very different experiences, and some of them are extreme if you think of assault. And so we can't expect such a person to be open to all opportunities. So while we do our work and we're saying, yes, we're providing with opportunities, people's experiences shape how they see and perceive things. So a lot of the work that I do on gender and environment and gender and climate, for example, one of the things that we really have to bear in mind is how perceptions are different between men and women, boys and girls. But also, if you look at gender, you have to look at not just gender, but age, disability, ethnicity, race, class. All of these things shape how people perceive opportunities and challenges.
Great. Monica, what's your perspective on this, especially in sustainable commodity work?
Bueno, voy a responder en español. Es un poco difícil estar sentado al lado del experto de género y tener que responder estas preguntas. Y lo voy a hacer un poco desde mi perspectiva, obviamente, y entrando ya al tema de producción de bienes. Creo que es súper importante primero conocer y reconocer que la mujer tiene un rol muy importante en la generación y producción de productos, en la producción de commodities. Y muchas veces ese rol en la cadena de valor se ve invisibilizado. Entonces necesitamos primero visibilizar el rol que tiene la mujer en la cadena de valor, reconocer el rol que tiene la mujer, y en línea con eso me parece que una estrategia que es importante y que nosotros deberíamos promover es el empoderamiento económico de las mujeres, además de entendiendo que hay distintos tipos de violencia y que un tipo de violencia contra la mujer es la violencia económica. Entonces, empoderar económicamente a la mujer le permite acceder a mercados, le permite controlar sus actividades productivas, controlar su tiempo, tal vez acceder a más tierras. Tú mencionabas que hay un gap grande entre hombres y mujeres, como de 20 o 30% de tenencia de tierra o de producción. Entonces creo que con ese empoderamiento se puede cerrar la brecha.
Thank you. Sandra, so we know that, half the world's agricultural work is performed by women, but we still have a 32% gender gap persisting globally. How could we move faster and get women to have more share of the power? Like, what can we do to speed this up?
Me siento más cómoda hablando en español de estos temas y Mónica acaba de mencionar varias cosas importantes y que además, bueno, me llaman la atención que sea agricultura, sea pesca, siguen existiendo estas diferencias Y yo creo que una de las cosas que has mencionado, Mónica, es vital y es parar la violencia, ¿no? Cualquier tipo de violencia emocional, económica, física, tiene que parar contra las mujeres y recuerdo que en la universidad la materia que estudié, la línea, la especialización era zoología y era además los grandes vertebrados y las mujeres que estudiábamos eso, o sea, teníamos que ser fuertes, masculinas para ir al campo y había una discriminación con nuestros colegas si no éramos así, ¿no? Entonces algo que yo creo que hemos vivido, entonces yo creo que el tema de la violencia, la independencia económica, política también es muy importante. La pirámide está inversa, o sea, las mujeres, la mayoría, como tú dices, están en posiciones de no decisión, entonces hay que invertir, yo creo, o equilibrar esa pirámide, ¿no?
Micah, given, also your global perspective, and that we know that, nature benefits more when women make land management decisions, what becomes possible when there's no longer any discrimination against women and girls?
I think there are very many things possible and that would become possible. Let me talk about one that is also one of the SDG goals, which is ending hunger. The FAO estimates that if women had the same access as men to resources, that means finance, education, land rights and land management, 150 million people would stop going to bed hungry. So that's an enormous number that women can have an impact on. So it is shown that women reinvest about 90% of their earnings back to their family compared to 35% of men. So they reinvest in the education of their kids, they reinvest back into their farms. So now that doesn't only have a large effect on families, but on entire communities.
Yeah, I'm just kind of stunned by that figure. Thank you. Rini, what do you think? What difference would it make, to your work on the ground in Indonesia, if we stopped all discrimination against women and girls?
I think we can achieve a lot more, a lot faster. Yeah, because especially we know that sustainability is a complex issue and it's very complex. It needs a lot of involvement from a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders. So if we give the women and girls an equal opportunity for men, they can be equally contributed and participate into the effort. They can bring more expertise to the work. They can help a lot. They can even lead the process. So that's why I think if this discrimination is ended, then we can achieve a more sustainable planet, I guess.
Given everything that we've heard, what can everyone do? Men, women, all genders, and to support a stronger and faster move towards gender equality?
Well, I think we can all make a commitment, a real tangible commitment to gender equality, and along the way to really ensuring that we also invest in gender equity, which means that you're providing the tools and supports and finance to those who need it to make sure that everybody's at the same level and has the same opportunity and choices. I think also we can all put ourselves in the shoes of each other, understand where we're coming from, what biases, unconscious and otherwise, we may be grappling with, and how that shapes how we do the work, how we engage, how we manage stakeholder consultations, for example, how we deal with conflict. Last but not least, I think it's really finding ways to engage with leaders, decision makers, and particularly the police. In the work on violence, one of the key opportunities and challenges that we have is not just the law, but how those who basically serve the law see these things. And if they continue to see violence as a man and wife thing, well then little changes. And I'm not saying that all policemen do, but this is still a challenge that we have. If they don't understand why economic violence is a problem, then they're not likely to be able to do something about it or to find where in the law this can be applied.
Yeah. And also one of the things I know is like the more privileged one is, whether that's on a race-wise, gender-wise, economic, access-wise, the more privileged you are, the more blind you are to your privilege. So just like the awareness work that has to be done around that is just like widespread and global and really necessary. So thank you. Yeah, thank you. Jess, what do you think both men and women can do to end discrimination against women and girls?
I think it is an issue of awareness, like you said. And I think the biggest thing we can do is acknowledge it, that it exists, and talk about it. So talk about it to each other, talk about it in our homes, with our children, with our partners, at our offices, amongst our teams, with the stakeholders that we engage, but to really recognize it. And it doesn't mean that we all have to agree all the time. We may see it differently, but it's to have that conversation and to allow that conversation to flow and to allow it to become a regular part of life.
Sandra, what might this look like, on a day-to-day level in our working lives as women?
Bueno, eso es una buena pregunta porque de hecho a veces como hablamos de una manera un poco teórica o conceptual y yo creo que, Jess ahora acaba de decirlo, que en realidad es un poco la tarea nuestra de verlo en el día a día, ¿no?
Micah, what are your thoughts here?
I mean, imagine a world where we have equal representation. So equal representation meaning in decision positions. So not only we have a workforce that is balanced, but we also have the decision-making positions built in an equal basis. So I think your example at the beginning of the Fortune 500 companies and how many women leaders they are was 26 out of 500, so that just goes to show. And then what else would we have? We would have equal pay. We have, I can speak for Germany, there's a gender pay gap of 21%. If you balance it out, so there's 21% because a lot of women work part-time and in lower paying jobs. But even if you balance it out on a level of same job, same pay, women still earn 6% less. And now the interesting part is that we already see a gender pay gap in boys and girls because girls actually receive less pocket money than boys, which I thought was quite an interesting statistic. So it starts very early, and if we would have no discrimination, then I think these would exactly be the little changes that would have a large effect. We have children books that teach boys how to negotiate them pocket money, and they teach girls how to apply makeup. So there is a large discrimination already starting there of what is important in life and how people view you and your role. And I think that's something that needs to change.
What do you think we can all do? What efforts can we make as a community here to end this discrimination sooner?
Well, I guess one thing is to question our own stereotypes. And you mentioned privilege. So the one thing is to be aware of your own privilege. That's, I think, a big one. Then start early. Yeah, how do we raise not only our girls, but how do we raise our boys? Be aware of your own language. It's not always the boss he and the nurse she or the assistant she, but it's the boss she and the assistant he. So that we also in our very daily language make sure that we see a gender balance.
Karen, final reflections.
So some of those final reflections really just came out. I was also going to comment on the observation that I've been in a few too many gender meetings that are all women. We can't talk about actually making a difference if it's only women talking to each other about making a difference for women. And so, to what extent within our organizations are we looking at gender and having men and women together working on the topic of gender. One of the last things I'll mention is this issue of sort of practical steps. And I think of myself as someone very sort of gender aware, who's been able to hire people and think about women and advancement of careers. But our young HR person said she did an analysis because she just wanted to know. And she brought it to me kind of like, do you want this? And I said, yeah, of course. And it turned out that we didn't have a problem of gender pay gap, but it resulted in a whole conversation around how do we think about promotions, how do we think about advancement, and then a conversation around the fact that often young women in their in nonprofits, but I think often in careers, are perhaps less confident. And to what extent then were there perhaps being promotions in an unequal sort of way, just due to a confidence barrier, perhaps?
Monica, what's bubbling up inside? What thoughts do you have about this?
Bueno, primero me gustaría reforzar lo que acabas de decir. Es importante educar a niños y niñas en igualdad de derechos, a niños y niñas empoderadas y empoderados, porque creo que si bien las estadísticas tienen datos súper alarmantes relacionados con la discriminación contra la mujer, los hombres y los niños también sufren discriminación, y los hombres sufren discriminación y violencia desde que son pequeños también. Entonces, desde el hogar, criemos niños y niñas empoderadas y empoderados. También me gustaría que más hombres se unan a esta causa, porque el tema de género no es un tema de mujeres. El tema de género es un tema de entender los roles entre hombres y mujeres, y además el tema de feminismo no es un tema de mujeres locas. El tema de feminismo está relacionado con promover la igualdad de derechos entre hombres y mujeres. Entonces me parece que necesitamos más hombres que impulsan la causa, más hombres feministas, como estábamos conversando acá.
Next conference, let's have a men's conversation about this. Any volunteers for next conference? Yay! Thank you very much for your passion and your preparation.